I used Final Cut Pro for about 8 years and was actually really hard to convince me to try anything new because I was such a big fan of it, like especially magnetic timeline was something that I really enjoyed. And also I'm a big Apple fanboy. I enjoy the simplistic approach that they always use in all of their apps and also in their product designs. And I was also heavily invested in it because I had all the plugins, etc. But then there's also this part in me that constantly wants to try out new things. Like it's the same as buying a camera from a new brand. That's kind of the feeling that I had last year when the DaVinci Resolve 17 version came out. Honestly, YouTube is so bad for your pocket. I mean, a new product comes out on update or something like that, and your whole feed is full with videos about it, and you're like, wow, that looks so good, I must have it. And a few months later, it's already obsolete. It's actually what's happening right now with me and the Fujifilm X-H2S. This camera looks so good. Let's switch back to topic. I don't even remember anymore why I wanted to try out DaVinci Resolve. There were like some features that I was interested in, but I don't remember anymore what. But what I still remember was that it was a total disaster, basically. It took me twice as long to edit one YouTube video than in Final Cut. And the colors also looked different after exporting it. You know, in Final Cut, after exporting a video, it always looks exactly the same in QuickTime as it looks in your timeline, which is super convenient. But in DaVinci Resolve, you have so many ways to set your color grading workflow up that it's very easy to mess it up actually, and that's kind of what happened there. But then version 18 came out a few weeks ago and it was exactly the same feeling as I had before. I saw depth map and the new object tracking, like how easy that is, and the cloud collaboration also, that's super good when I work together with Daniel, or at least it will be super good, it's not available yet. That looked so good that I really believed like, okay, DaVinci Resolve could actually be the future, not Final Cut or any other video editing app. That's why I decided to try it out again, and this time it was actually really different. And before trying version 18, I actually went on the Blackmagic website and I watched all their tutorials about editing in DaVinci Resolve, and this is why I was actually a lot faster. I was still a bit slower as in Final Cut because I was not 100% used to it, but it was not much slower, like not twice as slow as before. And this time I discovered that there are actually a lot of features in DaVinci Resolve that I like over Final Cut, especially also when it comes to speed, like editing fast, surprisingly. And there's at first color management, which you can set up in your project settings, and then you tell DaVinci Resolve which color or picture profile and color space you shot your videos in, and it automatically converts all this footage into normal Rec 709 colors. It's kind of applying a conversion LUT to your footage, but it's better because it's more dynamic, and I think DaVinci Resolve also uses some algorithms really to detect the right colors and stuff like that. I don't know exactly how that works in the back end, but I can only tell that just by telling DaVinci Resolve what picture profile you shoot in suddenly makes your footage already look so good that if you don't really care about perfect colors in your videos, you could already export it. Like, it looks better than many YouTube videos that I've seen, especially when you're a beginner. And there's also the group feature in the color page where you can group clips that are within a certain scene or that somehow look similar, and then you can apply the same color grades or LUTs or whatever you want to use there to all of those clips at once. So it's kind of like using an adjustment layer in Final Cut Pro, but I like that more because adjustment layers are really only good in Final Cut Pro when you have a simple timeline, but as soon as your edit becomes a bit more complex, you have to cut them everywhere and so on. So that also takes more time then, and in DaVinci Resolve with this group feature, it just works. So that's really handy. And for editing fast, there's also another feature that I really enjoy. That is here on the speed editor, the close-up button. That's great for editing A-roll, because when you edit A-roll and you make a jump cut, you want to hide the jump cut by zooming into the next clip to make it look a bit like another camera angle, and this button does that automatically. Like, you just press it, it overlays a clip, and the clip is automatically zoomed in. And it's actually even better than in Final Cut Pro, because there you at first have to zoom in, and then you would also need to set the position. But here with this close-up button, it automatically uses AI to detect your face or whatever is in the shot, and it automatically keeps the frame of the shot. So it doesn't only zoom in by a certain degree automatically, but it really looks where your face is and it ensures that your face is not cut off or stuff like that. I'm not sure if there's also a keyboard shortcut for that. Still have to figure that out because I only did like the A-roll edit with the speed editor so far. But if there is, then you should definitely utilize that as well. And it doesn't end there. There's also the power zoom feature, which also makes especially editing your A-roll a bit faster. And this is really just with a click of a button, it automatically zooms in or out of your footage. In Final Cut, I either had to use keyframes there or I had to use an external plugin and overlay it with a title that does that. But here it's done automatically. So I really did not expect that. Like when I think about editing fast, I always think about Final Cut, but Blackmagic really does a lot to make editing faster for their users. So these features really enhance the speed of your editing a bit, but of course there's lots of other great stuff like object tracking especially that is also available in Final Cut, but it's not as good there. Like it's enough to track text and stuff like that, but if you want to do mass transitions, for example, you would have to mask out every little frame, and in DaVinci Resolve the object tracking is actually good enough that you oftentimes would not need to do that. It also saves a lot of time overall, again, like it all comes down to time. But there are also other effects that I really love, like for example, sun in your footage, and it generates a lens flare that moves around realistically with the camera motion or motion. I don't know, but it moves around with the camera. That's especially good for drone shots, and I would actually say because DaVinci Resolve has so many good effects included already that even if you buy the studio version, it's still a lot cheaper overall as buying Final Cut, because in Final Cut you end up buying a lot of plugins to add lots of functionalities that you need to the app. But in DaVinci Resolve, you don't necessarily have to do that. And talking about plugins, I actually worried that I won't have the plugins that I need available in DaVinci Resolve, which actually turned out not to be true. Like I use some plugins from Motion VFX a lot, MTuber 2 for example, to have my subscribe animations and stuff like that. And that is available in DaVinci Resolve also from Motion VFX. They also have lots of other plugins available for both Final Cut and DaVinci Resolve, like MTuber 3 and MTutorial and lots of others. So that's great. And also plugins that I use a lot is Film Convert and Cinematch, and they are also available in DaVinci Resolve. But let's put all the features aside for a moment, because there's also one more thing that I could not imagine before that I really love about DaVinci Resolve, and that is that it completely changed my video editing workflow. Like the best workflow I would say is that you in the first step completely focus on your story, like cutting the A-roll down and maybe already placing some B-roll shots in between the B-roll to like show, don't tell, so that you already have the story really well built in the timeline. And then from there in the second step, you overlay your B-roll on top of the A-roll, then you cut everything to the music, then you add special effects, then you do your sound design, and then your color grading. And here's the problem with Final Cut. In Final Cut, you have everything in one place. And in DaVinci Resolve, you basically have a page for everything. Like I use the cut page for my first step to really build the storyline. Then I do effects and a bit more advanced editing in the edit page and in Fusion. And then I go into the music page to do some music editing, also a bit in the edit page then of course. And then color page to do my color grading, obviously. And in Final Cut, because everything is in one place, it always distracts me. Like I start editing my storyline, but then I see a shot that I think, oh, that looks really nice. Let's just do a little bit of color grading there to see how it comes out later. And then after doing the color grading, you're like, oh, that looks good. We could also add some effects to it. And then 1 hour later, it's like, oh, I actually just wanted to edit the A-roll. So that's a bit problematic. And that doesn't happen in DaVinci Resolve because you really follow that step-by-step process, at least if you stick to it. Now, of course, you could also stick to that process in Final Cut, but it's like always so tempting because you have everything in one place to get distracted that you will likely do. And DaVinci Resolve just organizes your workflow a little bit better. That's something that I actually value a lot. I know that all sounds pretty good so far, but of course there are also a few things that I don't like about DaVinci Resolve, which we will talk about in a minute, because I first want to show you the Epidemic Sound Community Challenge, which runs until 9th June. So next week, there's not that much time anymore. On this challenge, you can submit a video that you edited either in Final Cut or DaVinci Resolve Resolve or Premiere or whatever video editor you use, and you can win prizes there. And one of those prizes is a mentorship with either me or other creators, where you get 3 sessions of 1 hour where we help you to become a better videographer or more successful on YouTube or whatever you want to. And there are also lots of other prizes, such as a ZVE 10 or a yearly subscription on Epidemic Sound. So definitely check this challenge out. As mentioned, it only runs until the 9th June, so not much time anymore. I will leave a link to it in the description below. But let's talk about what I did not like about DaVinci Resolve, and it's like kind of like you can't have both, and that's the magnetic timeline. Like sometimes when I want to do some simple stuff in the edit page, especially when I, for example, want to insert clips in my main timeline and I want them to automatically make space there, it's like a bit more complicated than in Final Cut Pro, so that's maybe I just haven't figured out the right technique yet for that, but seems to be a bit more complicated than in Final Cut, so that could be better in my opinion. And then also generally, like it's such professional app that the whole interface is a lot more cluttered. Cluttered is probably the wrong word there. Like it is sorted in a certain way, but it just feels a bit more cluttered because there's so much that you can do everywhere. So I like the simplistic interface from Final Cut a little bit more. And also when it comes to color grading, for example, like there are so many options that you can choose that especially as a beginner you will likely be a bit confused. But I must say it's not a big issue overall because you get used to it and you also figure out your settings over time. There are many tutorials on the internet that helps you with that, so it is nothing that you won't overcome. It's just a bit harder, I would say, to get into overall as it is in Final Cut. But aside from that, I'm actually really positively surprised. Like I don't have much to complain about it. I had a few crashes, of course, but it's a beta version that I'm using right now, so it's to be expected that it crashes a bit more often. And I think, as far as I remember, when I used the version 17, which was a stable version, I think I only had 1 crash or so, maybe even none. It actually runs pretty stable, and also the export times, etc. are really fast, so thumbs up here, Blackmagic. But of course, if you watch this video until here, you want to know if you should switch to DaVinci Resolve or not. It really depends on you. Like as mentioned before, Final Cut is a bit simpler, a bit easier to use overall, especially easier to get into. So if you really want to have a like super easy and quick way to edit your vlogs, for example, then I would go for Final Cut, especially if you edit a lot on your MacBook on a smaller screen, like 13-inch especially, because DaVinci Resolve takes up a little bit more space with everything that's going on there, while Final Cut really allows you to give a lot of space to the viewers. So Final Cut is definitely better on smaller screens, but if you want to have a bit more professional workflow, if you do more color grading and you do a lot of tracking and so on for your transitions and stuff like that, then I actually think that you should try DaVinci Resolve and you will be really happy with it. So I hope this video was helpful, and I want to end it here by thanking all the amazing YouTube creators that make it easy to learn apps such as DaVinci Resolve. So over the past 2 weeks I watched so many tutorials, again especially from creators like Vokas Kazi and Casey Ferris and lots of others, and it reminded me of how awesome YouTube actually is. It is kind of the biggest university that we have on this planet, and so many people share their knowledge here. This is amazing. And if you are some sort of creator that provides educational content or some other value, just keep doing it. Even if it's hard, it's still worth it, because every single video that gets up here that provides solid information just makes this platform better, and I think that should give you a strong enough why to keep going. So even if it's hard sometimes, keep creating videos. You're awesome. Thank you.